various issues. My name is Richard Bruce Lamte. I'm the country coordinator for EIFL. I'm a librarian in University. This morning we have Milica, and Irina here to talk to us about supporting researchers. So I just don't want to waste much time. We just want to hand over to Irina, and then maybe she can introduce Milica. Well, thank you very much.
Hello, dear colleagues, and thank you, Richard. I have a great pleasure to introduce Milica Ševkušić, who is EIFL country coordinator in Serbia, and she's involved in a lot of training activities in her institution and also in the country. And she kindly agreed to share her experiences with us, and we planned this webinar as a conversation. So hope it will be interactive, and looking forward to the discussions. And thanks for joining. Over to you, Milica.
Yes, I will now. Okay, I guess you can see my presentation. So I will just add to this that I've been working as a librarian at a small research institute, which is closely connected to the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts for about 14 years, 14 and a half. And it's a really small research institute. There was no library at the institute when I came for. It was inactive for more than 30 years, and the primary topic is chemistry, material science. This is what my researchers do, and I had quite many problems establishing communication with them at the beginning because they were not accustomed to having a library. So everything I will be sharing today is primarily related to this experience. Apart from this, I've been working with some other research communities, mostly through volunteer work, through library associations, through collaboration and networking with colleagues. So I'm quite familiar with research communities that are doing a completely different research areas, for example, humanities, etc. I tend to be quite open to their feedback, and I tend to be very attentive to their needs. So this is also included in this presentation. This is a brief outline of the topics to be covered today. The main focus will be providing support despite limited resources. So my library, you will hear later, it's about a library without a budget for anything, for any activities. Also, most research libraries at research institutes in Serbia are very similar. They don't have a dedicated budget for any activities. There is no systematic service development, etc. So the idea is to show what you can do, even if you have practically nothing, or if you have very, very little. It tends to show how you can build upon what you have and what you can learn and see in your community. I will briefly present the local context in Serbia, and then I will give some general considerations regarding the idea of supporting researchers and research. And then I will show some examples from my practice that are related to the research cycle. I was thinking about the concept. Shall I divide this into separate topics? Shall I divide it according to stakeholder groups, to junior, senior researchers? Then I decided to actually organize this according to the stages of the research cycle. And then after a brief conclusion, we will have a Q&A. So what's so characteristic of the Serbian local context? We have very good regulations about library information science. We have the law, which is quite detailed in some details. but there are also some gaps in it. We also have the national standards for individual types of libraries. We also have some local regulations and institutions, but none of them actually address support to the research process. The law and all the regulations focus much more on public libraries, which are actually the largest group of libraries. And no matter research libraries, actually libraries at research institutes, there are about 60 or 70 such research institutes, but they don't have many librarians, and in the library community we are not a big group, a big influential interest group. So this area is not really well covered in the regulations. Also, it's not very well covered in the librarians information science curriculum. We have a dedicated study group at the Faculty of Philology, but they don't cover support to research in any of the stages of their education, not even at PhD studies, except the PhD candidate actually wants to deal with a topic related to support to the research process and researchers. They are quite unaware of this, and the problem is that librarians, once they complete their studies, they are not really willing to work at research institutes. They don't have the appropriate skills, but this is a minor problem because they can adopt these skills through work. This is a changing skill set. So this is something that is not really a problem if they don't know something in advance. The problem is that they get afraid, they get frightened by the amount of work, because these libraries are usually one-person libraries, and they have to do all the work alone, and it may be quite challenging. So also we have certified professional development programs organized by public libraries, by university libraries, but they usually don't cover these topics. Some topics that are intended for the improving skill sets among librarians, they can be applied to the support of the research process, but there is no dedicated training for this topic. Also, there is a dispute among librarians at various institutions, libraries and research institutions, whether librarians should be supporting the research process or not. For some, this is a new area. For the others, this is an area that doesn't have to do anything with librarians' work. For me, this is an old-fashioned approach. For me, it is only normal to collaborate with your users, to support your users, whoever your users may be. If one is working at the research library, the users are researchers. So we should support researchers. Their needs might be different from the needs of the users of public libraries, but that's about different kinds of users. So the number of librarians who share my opinion is now growing. We have a considerable, a growing group. It's not a huge group. It's about perhaps 30 plus people who share this opinion, and who actually, while finding this approach challenging, they also find it quite rewarding, because they can learn a lot and they can develop their skills, and they actually have a very fruitful collaboration with their users. Also, there are no formal guidelines in the Serbian language available for supporting researchers and researchers. Also, there is no dedicated staff. For example, you understand the example of research libraries. For example, at the university library, there is a department that is called Scientific Information Department, but it is not quite clear whether to what extent they should get involved in supporting the research process. Also, most services that are intended for researchers are quite traditional. It's information retrieval. A librarian helps to researchers find some information that they can't find a loan, then library exchange international, for example, if they can't find a publication. Also citation reports, that is something that is done by university libraries. They also have Ask a Librarian service, and also they're quite responsive to phone calls, to any questions researchers may have when they decide to call them, but there are no structured guidelines. And the support is not really structured. Also, what is characteristic of Serbia, but this may also be a characteristic of your environment, is that librarians are involved in support to scholarly publishing. Most journals in Serbia are diamond open access journals. We also have many open access, or at least free to read monographs. Publishers are institutions mostly, or scholarly societies. So researchers employed at these institutions are researchers, and they're also active as reviewers or editorial staff members. And this kind of support comes as natural, but it is not formalized. I am mentioning this because librarians are actually doing this. They're very often involved as technical secretaries, technical editorial staff members. Sometimes they're forced to do this and they are not paid for this. This is not a part of their official job description, but they are actually doing this, and this should be also perceived as a kind of support to researchers, because the researchers are actually performing the roles of editors and reviewers in those journals. This is a brief outline of our research support opportunities available in Serbian libraries. As you may probably know, we have a national library consortium, COPSON, which manages all the subscriptions to services, databases, journals, etc. They are directly funded by the government, and this is actually very well organized, and this is actually the only way this could be feasible, because we have quite many small libraries, and managing subscriptions individually wouldn't work. Simply, this is not an option. It's been active for about 20 years, and apart from providing access to the academic databases, they have a very good additional set of in-house services intended for researchers. For example, researchers are alerted when their papers appear in the Web of Science. Also, they have user support. They support scholarly journals by assigning DOIs and actually maintaining a publishing platform, DOI Serbia. They are very responsive. They answer quite many emails and phone calls, and researchers even visit them. But the problem is that there are not many of them. This is a team of about 5 people, and they cannot manage all these things, nor should they. Also, what is interesting is a training program that is specifically dedicated to researchers. This is for PhD students that are financially supported by the government. These are talented students. And each year in October, there is a program, a whole day program, very interesting. It covers everything from information retrieval through selecting journals, reliable journals, citation databases, to research ethics. Really quite exhausting, because it lasts for about 6 or 7, 8 hours, and it's only one day. But actually, this is sometimes this is the first and a rare opportunity for PhD students to get informed about these topics. We also have university libraries, which have a different status, and they have different sizes. The university library at the University of Belgrade, it has a more prominent position in our network of libraries, while other universities, there are 4 other public universities that their libraries are smaller, and they have a different mode of operation. The University Library of Belgrade, due to some inconsistencies in the funding system, they also perform some actually tasks tasks that are normally assigned to public libraries. And because they are funded mostly by the ministry responsible for culture, and not the funds they receive from the ministry responsible for science are quite poor compared to this. So that's why their roles are not always clear. They have a scientific information department, and if a researcher decides to call this department, they will get the information, but there are not many people there, and they usually perform some quite traditional tasks, for example, as citation reports, etc. They have an Ask a Librarian service. So much depends on individual librarians, of their readiness to dedicate themselves to the support. And there is a notable example of the training for PhD students that is conducted by our colleague Dragana Stolic. And the advantage of this program is that she is actually also a researcher. She has a PhD degree, and she actually shares her experience through this program. Unfortunately, she is alone in this, and she cannot cover a huge number of potential attendees. Faculty libraries are mostly focused on services for students. They mostly lend books, and recently they are involved in maintaining repositories. Very often they are also a one-man show. Rarely there are more than 2 librarians at those libraries. As you can see, our network of libraries at the universities is quite decentralized. Researchers actually have their own libraries at their institutions, but those libraries don't provide many services related to researchers. And also a serious obstacle is that communication is limited, and that's up to researchers, because they don't actually, at the university, they don't see those faculty libraries as a place where they can get the information. And this is frustrating for some more proactive colleagues. But this also depends largely on individual motivation of librarians. We also have libraries at research institutes, such as mine. I've also mentioned these are mostly one-person libraries, but in some cases, there are quite many libraries that they're inactive, they don't have a librarian employed. And this is a serious problem. Recently, these libraries have got involved in maintaining repositories, and they are probably the most active part of the community in these terms. And they see that quite many librarians at research libraries see repositories as their chance to recreate their jobs and to actually get a better status in their institution and to ensure the sustainability of their libraries. Some of them provide training, and as you will see later, if they are not providing training themselves, we try to organize training within the network. So they provide training, but they invite somebody else to give this training. In most cases, they provide those traditional support services, such as information retrieval, and they are involved very much in support to scholarly publishing. We have a few librarians that are actually, their job title is librarians, but they are doing only the job related to scholarly publishing. This is not okay, but this is how it works. So we are now switching to a more general ground. In terms of skill set, what does a librarian need in order to be able to support researchers and the research process as well? I will explain the difference later. So this is a very rough classification that is not quite accurate, but it illustrates what skills are needed. First, we need to have a context-related knowledge. We should know what was the shape of the research cycle, what a research life cycle involves. We also need to be aware of the user needs and also their behaviors, their practices, their common practices, because they may be different in different research communities. What we increasingly need is the awareness of open science and skills related to open science. We need to know how scholarly publishing functions internationally, even if we are not involved in publishing as many of my colleagues are. We should know a lot about copyright and licensing, and we should be aware of the research evaluation system internationally, but primarily nationally. This is very important, and these context-related knowledge and skills are usually the main obstacle and the main frustration to young librarians when they start working at a research institute. They get frightened, but this is, they pick up the most important information quite rapidly, but at first this may be really frustrating because these things are not really simple. So as for skills, specific skills, we need to have advanced digital skills. We should know information retrieval very, very well. This is crucial. And you will see later, this is usually a topic that is neglected. We assume that researchers know this. How to retrieve information. We assume that librarians know this, but actually this is an area where there is always something new to learn. We should know a lot about the metadata, citation analysis. It's very important for researchers, metrics, all sorts of metrics, official bibliometrics, traditional bibliometrics, and new metrics as well. We should have educational and training skills, and we will increasingly have to learn about data analysis because research data management is an emerging topic for all of us. Also, we should have a knowledge related to services and tools, that is academic databases, which are available, what can be done with a particular database, which information can be found there. Also aggregators and search engines, academic search engines. This is another neglected topic because they are underused, but are available. You will see later. Reference managers. Well, later, as I continue talking, you will probably think that I'm selling Zotero, but reference managers are very important. They can help both researchers and us in many aspects. We should be familiar with research repository software, communication tools, and also some visualization tools, starting from Excel diagrams and graphs to more developed tools. And also this is very important if you are working directly with people, with researchers, with any specific user groups. We should have all sorts of soft skills. They're very important, and tacit knowledge has a very, very important role in this part, in this kind of librarianship related to research. We should also have an advanced knowledge of English, and in social sciences and humanities, other languages may be important. The advanced knowledge of English is important because practically all the academic services, databases, tools, they are in English. The help is in English. Support is in English. If you need to communicate with their support staff, you need to formulate your questions in English. So it's very important to know. For example, in Serbia, a person who is not fluent in English can be a successful librarian in a public library, but in a research library, this is a considerable obstacle if the ability to understand and to express oneself in English is limited. And also domain-specific knowledge is an advantage. My background is in art history. I'm working with chemists, and it took me quite an effort to understand what they're doing. Had I had training in chemistry at the university, this would have been much easier for me. This is not something that can prevent you from doing your job properly, especially if you're motivated and ready to learn, but this is certainly an advantage, and it actually makes many things easier for you if you have domain-specific knowledge. The main areas of work for librarians supporting researchers and research process very roughly includes maintaining infrastructure, whatever this infrastructure may include, no matter whether these are services or repositories or any other databases or a website. This is all infrastructure. Also, designing and maintaining services is very important, and you will see this later, because if you're working with researchers who have changing needs, they also have to learn many new things, and you have changing, the structure of your users is changing. For example, when I came here, there were quite many PhD students. Their needs were different from the needs of senior researchers. So you have to grow and develop new services as your community, user community grows. So designing and maintaining services is very important. I used to practice some things, to provide some services that are now pointless when I don't have PhD students, because senior researchers don't need them. So it's very important. Personal assistance is crucial. If you're working with a small research community, personal assistance is something that is practically a must. You can't avoid it, even if you don't want, if you want to protect your time, your private sphere, whatever. If you have a small research community, you will be forced sooner or later to provide some kind of personal assistance and to work one-on-one. And training and advocacy is an important pillar of our work. So my guiding idea and the guiding idea of any librarian is connecting people and information is crucial, because we have access to information and people may not be aware that they need a particular piece of information. They're not aware that a particular service exists. They don't know that there is a solution to their problem. And we are those who should connect them with this information and provide assistance in making the best use of the services and information they can find with our help. So the concept of users' needs is crucial, and it's very tricky. It's a very tricky issue. How do we know what user needs are? Even if we have users who come and share their needs with us, we cannot rely on this, because their current needs are not their future needs, and also they may not be aware that they actually have a need. They may not be able to formulate a need, to express it. So tacit knowledge and soft skills are important, because during such a conversation, we should be able to identify the tacit needs, something that they don't say, but is implied in what they're explaining to us. This is also very important. But this may not reflect the awareness of the changing landscape in their area of research and in the global environment. For example, they may not be aware. A few years ago, they were not aware of the needs related to research data management, in my country especially. So we had to anticipate this need. We had to know that they will have to face this need once, and we had to be ready to provide support for this need. So it's a very tricky issue. Also, there is a difference in what they perceive as their need and what we perceive as their needs. So this is a very tricky issue, and this is something that we should never stop thinking about. Whatever topic we discuss, we should always think about users' needs, and whether there is something they don't know how to express, but that may reflect a need that can be covered and supported by a service provided by a librarian. They sometimes have unsustainable needs. They want impossible things. For example, I need all my citations from Google Scholar to be transferred to the Web of Science. They need this. Well, they see this as a need, but this is unsustainable. This is impossible. So we also have to know how to deal with this kind of needs. So this I see these two sides, these two lists as something that is quite crucial for our job. It's very important to understand that researchers and librarians have diverse priorities in perceiving and designing support for researchers. Librarians should, and they usually do, focus on supporting the research process. We do care for individual people, we do care for their needs, but we are trying to establish a system, a structure, and we are trying to develop services that can cover a greater number of users. Researchers are always focused on themselves. And this is not only so in my country, this is so internationally, because they are quite mobile, they don't stay affiliated with one research institution. They have their own careers. They don't always care about the benefits their research provides for the institutions they are currently employed by, and this is something we should take into account. So we should be able to make a balance between these two things. They're primarily interested in whatever can help them in the promotion to higher titles, research titles. They're interested about impact factors and rankings. When they see that they have a need to have some piece of information, in most cases this is related to impact factors and rankings and points that they will score. They usually don't come with some philosophical questions regarding the research environment, the equity in the research environment, sustainability of some software solutions, or the sustainability of the publishing system. They usually don't ask such questions. Some of them do, but and more in humanities, but in most cases they have very specific questions about things related to their careers. And generally speaking, they prefer personal assistance, which is sometimes not feasible, especially if there is only one librarian. Sometimes I can see this when I, for example, when I see that I have several researchers or a group of them having similar needs and having a similar problem, and I decide to organize a workshop to cover this problem or a Zoom meeting. It often happens that some of them just don't appear because they don't want their colleagues to know that I have this problem, and I have to take this into account. This might be frustrating for me that I have to explain the same thing many times, but this is something that is related to their mode of operation, to their psychological features, and this has to be taken into account. Now, librarians should find a way to deal with this. As for us, we have to have a broader picture. We have to be familiar with, for example, some trends in open science that are not currently relevant for, they're not interesting for our researchers at the moment, but will be in a few years. So we have to take care about these things. And sometimes it's very difficult if we have insufficient staff, which is the case in my country. It's very difficult to handle all these things at the same time. So I'm now switching to a brief overview of actually stops and points where researchers need support, and we can provide support throughout the research life cycle. So I divided this briefly into several groups. Information discovery and evaluation of information that is retrieved. There are several segments, and what is written here is actually, from my experience, these are the areas where I try to provide support to researchers. And these can be actually ideas if you are providing support, but you're not covering all these topics, to include some, or if you're not providing but are getting ready to provide support, this can be a good starting point. So you can do this, what I will show you can do this with quite limited resources. Actually, you can do it even without money. If you have some subscriptions handled by a body outside your organizations, as we have in Serbia, and if you have some services already there, you can build upon them. About the sources of information, researchers usually don't know which researchers are available. They have a limited idea of this. They have a list on the website of our national consortium, but they don't use these services. So where we can help as librarians is to show them that there are services that they can use and that they actually need, services that may be helpful, but they are not used. For example, until a few years ago, my researchers, when they search for journals where to publish and search for literature, they were giving too high a priority to Science Direct. And they didn't read very good papers. They missed very good papers published by journals from other publishers. So this is something where you can draw their attention. You can say them, okay, there is a new journal, there is a new service. There is a new service we are subscribed to, so I can provide training for this. So let me show you how it works. Also, beyond subscriptions, there are free services, aggregators, and academic search engines that are absolutely underused, I believe, globally. And these are the services where one can find papers that are not only in English, that are aggregated from repositories that cover a much wider range of sources than those available through subscribed services. So this is something where I'm trying to, I'm sure not too successfully, but I'm trying to increase the usage of these services. And also what is important and what was actually crucial for me when I started working at this institute, they're not using the full range of functionalities. If you are paying a subscription for a service, then use the full range it offers. If it offers, for example, safe searches, alerts, if user support is offered, then you can correct some errors in the system, use all of these. Our researchers don't use them. For example, they don't use safe searches and alerts. So I started building my job profile at the Institute by, some colleagues from other libraries called me the alerts lady, because I actually started building my profile as a librarian by managing alerts, by distributing these alerts to researchers. That's why it was very important for me to know what the research was about. And this has turned out to be something that they really appreciate. So this can be done. If you have services, then just use the full potential of them. The trickiest topic is searching. Searching is something that we all believe we know. And it's very, very difficult to get researchers come attend a training about searching skills. Their skills are quite limited. There are several studies published about it. The fact that they can handle digital gadgets and they are very skillful with social media, digital social media, doesn't mean that they know how to retrieve information. And actually, they don't really know how to. They perceive in a completely wrong light their searching skills. They believe that it's enough to just type search strings. They don't use Boolean operators. They don't use any advanced options. They don't even use the inverted commas. So they quotation marks. And they get very poor search results that they have to handle manually. And they don't even know how to evaluate these results. So I don't have a solution to this problem as yet. I try to provide training, and whenever I can, I try to provide to provide personal assistance in this when they come, but they don't come. Some of them are ashamed to ask a question because they believe that it is assumed that anybody should know this and that they are stupid if they don't know this. And it's very difficult to make them say, look, I don't know this, can you help me? So this is, for me, this remains a major challenge and a major source of frustration. That's where those alerts I'm sending mitigate the situation, because they help, because I do a complex search and I save this search, and that's how I manage to cover the area that they don't cover by the searches. But this is not how things should be. This is a suboptimal solution. So I don't know about your environment, but in my country, this is a serious problem. I've already mentioned they don't know how to evaluate the information. For example, they don't know how to assess the quality of the journal where something is published. They don't know how to, for example, identify whether some publications that I found are retracted. In some cases, retractions are not very transparent, and they don't know how to use post-publication services and functionalities. And also, finding full text legally is a challenge. They tend to use the illegal solutions, but these illegal solutions are now being less and less available. So it's very important for them to know how to find information, to find full text legally. And I will show this on a slide. I'm trying to, most cases I'm doing this for them, but I'm also trying to provide training on these tools. So this is how it works: save searches and alerts. You can Google Scholar is very good. You cannot make a very complex search string, but you can create multiple alerts to cover a topic. But there is a functionality and it works quite well. We are subscribed to Scopus. I don't know whether you are or not, but we are using Scopus a lot. And the way I'm using Scopus is a good example of using all of it. Just, okay, we are paying and we will use all of it. And also we are subscribed to EBSCO Discovery, which has a very good feature, federated search. And there is a functionality in this federated search to create alerts. So this saves a lot of time to me, because previously I had separate alerts, for example, in Science Direct, in Wiley, in Scopus, in Royal Society of Chemistry. Now, as this federated search covers all the subscribed sources and the databases, I create one saved search in EBSCO Discovery that covers all these available resources, and researchers get, usually weekly, they get this kind of list in their inbox, and I have a very positive feedback. When some years ago I tried to train them how to make these alerts themselves. Most of them actually preferred me to do this, and their perception of this service is very interesting, because some of them see it as a sign that a librarian is thinking about and that they have a person to rely on. And this is now not a rare, the situations when I get emails from them saying, thanks for thinking about me. These situations are now not rare. It means that they appreciate. What is, for example, typical of my researchers is that they don't, when they are doing experiments, they read less. They cannot do searches, they cannot, so they miss a considerable body of information. And this information, this is not something that I initially got from them. This kind of information I got by reading papers about the experience of different libraries worldwide. So I realized that practices among researchers are different, that they have different schedules, and that was an argument in favor of this approach, providing these alerts, because they can save these alerts either in their inboxes, or some of them, I have this kind of feedback, some of them just go and download the papers that they find interesting, put them in a folder, and then when they switch to writing, months later, they know that I have it there. So I have this kind of feedback that this approach is actually helpful. This is an example. This is something that works for my researchers. It may not work for your researchers, but this is an example of using the resources that we have and using them fully to support the research process. Reference managers, this has a high priority in training. You will see how many uses Zotero has and how it really offers considerable help to librarians. I don't know how my work would look like without it. I've been using it for more than 10 years, but this is another frustrating topic in my career, and probably the greatest one, because the adoption among researchers of reference managers in my country is quite poor. They're just, I don't know whether they are lazy to learn. It's not difficult, it's not complicated. There are probably many reasons that are not clear to me, but quite many of them avoid using reference managers and just keep to all practices related to citing references. But reference managers are not about inserting references in papers. They are about many other things. I've listed here 3 that are free. JobRef is an excellent tool for those using LaTeX, and because it formats, it uses other formats too, but it's specialized for BibTeX. Zotero is free and open source, and it will remain. Mendeley is owned by Elsevier, and that's why I have this kind of, there is a colleague librarian who is an expert in Mendeley, so usually when my researchers want this kind of training, I invite her. I definitely prefer Zotero because of its functionalities, but also because of the fact that it is free and open source, and it is developed by a community that cares for free and open source resources. What is a considerable obstacle that I would like to highlight here for librarians providing training and promoting reference managers is that librarians should be familiar with academic writing. They should have this research component in their profile, and they should know how a paper should look like, why there are different citation skills. It's very important because if they don't know this, they will not be able to provide competent training and support for reference managers. So this is how Zotero can help in finding full text. This feature is already, this is not a plugin, this is now a regular feature. So you just import metadata, for example, from Scopus. I often import metadata from Scopus massively, several dozen publications. I just drop them in Zotero. And then when I need to find full text, I just select them, right click, and say find available PDFs. Zotero functionality collaborates, it's integrated with the Unpayable. Unpayable is a great service that offers an extension called Unpayable Browser Extension. Here is a link, it's free and it's very useful. If there is a version of paper available in a repository or somewhere else, it will show a green icon in your browser here somewhere to the right, and upon clicking on this icon you will be able to see the full text. So this functionality, there is a huge database. For example, in Serbia we register our repositories for harvesting in Unpayable. This is integrated in Zotero. So Zotero, and you can customize as well. If you have other sources of full text, you can customize the code in Zotero. It's quite simple to include these as well. But by doing this, you won't have to use, for example, to check Unpayable. Zotero will find it. Sometimes it doesn't find all the PDFs in the first run. sometimes it's good to repeat the process, but it's very efficient. It saves a lot of time for me. For example, I download all the papers by my researchers. Apart from having them on the repository, I also have them on my computer. So this is really helpful. It saves a lot of time. For example, if I want to download all of them in the same run. Core Discovery. Core is another aggregator. Probably, I believe it's the biggest aggregator of repositories and open access journals and other sources. This Core Discovery extension helps you find legally free versions of papers and other resources. So researchers don't use this very often. So this is something that I'm trying to show them, that they can use such tools, and they're really simple to use. As for identifying retracted publications, it's very important, because retracted publications shouldn't be cited in a list of references in a paper. This may be perceived as, for example, by a peer reviewer, as something that is well, not quite okay, that it reflects a negligence on the part of the author. So it's very important for researchers to know which papers are retracted or not, which are not. So there is a database developed by the Retraction Watch team. It's searchable, it's available, but this information is also embedded in Zotero. And also it's already there, it's not a separate plugin. So Zotero will mark the papers that are retracted. And this is a great help. Also, sometimes there are discussions around some papers. Something may be wrong with papers, something may be disputable. It's good to know this, because some of these papers may get retracted eventually. So it's good for researchers to know that some papers are disputed. And there is a tool provided by PubPeer. This is a website where you can find post-publication comments about some papers. Some are reporting some misconduct, but the others are actually just ordinary discussions about a topic in a paper. And there is a plugin that is free, which is very simple to use, and it shows this line when there are comments on PubPeer, and you can click on it and see whether some papers are disputable or not. This is something that researchers don't really use, but they should be using this. And this is something they may not be aware of. They may not be, many of them don't know that this exists. Also, Altmetric can sometimes provide information about the things that can be roughly classified as post-publication peer review. For example, this is a paper published last year where you can find very interesting discussion about this. The paper was disputed. It was eventually marked by the publisher as something that is disputed. It's not retracted, but Altmetric helps find this information. So this Altmetric bookmarklet is a free tool, and researchers should know. And it's so useful. We will see later. It may be useful for them to get information whether their papers are mentioned on Twitter or social media or somewhere else. Research data management, I won't discuss this in detail. This is a new topic for us. There are quite many challenges. It's quite, resources are available in English. We have produced some resources in Serbian. We are now very active in this area. There are quite many tools, but unless researchers have a mandate, unless they are part of a European project where they have to provide a research data management plan, and where they have to actually make their data available, they just ignore this segment. And they have a very superficial approach. For example, in my country, most researchers interpret the need to share their data as sharing supplementary information in the form of a PDF or a Word document, which is not a sustainable way, which is not aligned with FAIR principles. And this is a major problem. I'm currently trying to deal with this. While doing this, I'm providing personal assistance beyond my institute. I have some colleagues from other institutes, and whoever comes, I'm trying to work with them. I've recently worked with a group of researchers from my institute. We had at least 5 sessions discussing about the metadata. It's quite difficult for them to understand what descriptive metadata means. They put the title of the data set for them, experiment 1, sample 2. That's enough for them. And it's very difficult to explain to them that within a week or 2, they themselves wouldn't know what it actually means, that this is not actually what metadata is about. It's very, very difficult. And this is where discipline-specific knowledge helps a lot. And this is where I recommend a kind of extended personal assistance, because this is new and we need to define some principles and to define some good practices, which is in my country quite non-existent at the moment. Preparing and submitting publications. Here I will show what I'm actually doing. There are some things on the list that actually shouldn't be that these things shouldn't be performed by librarians constantly. But all of these things, librarians should be familiar with these things. For example, submitting the manuscript. This is something researchers should do, submit a manuscript. But I've been supporting them in this process from the outset, from the year 1 when I came here. And this was an important source of information for me, because this reveals how publishers work, which services they are using, which are the gaps there. For example, the areas where help is not, the help provided is not, I mean the help files provided are not clear enough. And for me, troubleshooting in this stage of the research cycle was very important, and it actually helped me be able to support scholarly publishers in my country. When they have questions and dilemmas, I can help them because I know this side of the process. So you shouldn't be doing this constantly. It's researchers' task, but it's a great advantage if you are familiar with all the details. For example, I'm also involved sometimes in communication with editors and peer reviewers. They ask me sometimes to read a peer review to say my impressions about it. For example, sometimes they get a very harsh peer review, and then from the language, from the phrasing, I can see something that they cannot see because they are focused on the content. So I'm trying to be as proactive as possible and to learn as much as possible about all these stages of work. Of course, one of the areas that librarians are absolutely indispensable is handling open access options, APCs, find reliable journals, especially if these journals are open access. They're all afraid of predatory journals, and yet some of them publish in journals that can be labeled as such. So handling discounts and waivers, this is something they don't really know how to find this information, and sometimes they're afraid to ask. So I'm often helping them to formulate a letter asking for a waiver, and I'm trying to explain to them that it is always good to ask for a waiver, even if it's not, if it doesn't seem to be possible. In Serbia, unfortunately, we don't have a fund for open access, so researchers are paying APCs from their own pocket, and that's why it's very important for me to provide as much help as possible. Also, there is another point that shouldn't be librarians' task. This is reading and copy editing. But this can also be very helpful, and this is a kind of help that I never refuse to my researchers. I've been reading their papers written in English because they usually write in English from the outset, and that's where we've managed to make a progress because at the beginning they were not aware how much of criticism coming from peer reviewers was related to to the language and to the fact that the paper was difficult to read because the English was not, the language was not okay, and what is related to the content, because peer reviewers are also humans. And if a paper is difficult to read by them, they may be harsher in their judgment. So this is where I try to help them. At the beginning, I read almost all of their papers, and this was really helpful for me in realizing the topics that they are covering. And this was crucial in being able to define those alerts that I mentioned. So this was really helpful for service development. This is not something that should be done by librarians, but there are other such things that you may find useful and where you should be flexible. Of course, now I do this quite rarely. Their English has improved, and they sometimes ask me, especially young researchers. I never refuse this because this is not really a lot of work. But this is an example of service where flexibility pays off. Also, understanding author guidelines may be a very difficult task for a young researcher. They are afraid to ask their tutors, their senior researchers, and this is where librarian can help this. Sometimes they ask, for example, they need a particular software tool to open a particular format, or they need a software tool to create images. I don't have they're not subscribed to Photoshop, so there are solutions, and they ask this. And also, this is a good example of, I call it crowdsourced approach to creating user support. Our colleague Mirjana Nešić, she works at a faculty she's a librarian there, but she's a kind of an expert in multimedia, dealing with multimedia. She is doing this she's helping in this area to her researchers, but she's also doing this in her spare time. That's a kind of her hobby, and she's really knowledgeable about this. So when we need a training in this area, we just invite her, and she usually comes. We all provide this as volunteers. We all provide this support. So if other colleagues, for example, invites me to provide training, I do this, and the other colleagues return in the same way. And for example, when we had I organized a workshop at my institute. There were not so many researchers. They didn't have really good, high expectations. But when the workshop was supposed to end, nobody wanted to go home. They realized that the tools presented to them were actually useful in their private life as well, not only in their professional career. Copyright licensing and permissions. This is another very important problem. Researchers are not aware whether they should ask permission for reproducing images. We had some very unpleasant situations because the paper was rejected because they didn't know they should ask. They didn't know they should ask permission, and they didn't know that they could get help at the library. So I'm very insistent on this. I'm boring. I occasionally, from time to time, I'm sending emails to them, reminding them that they should ask help if they need, especially in this area. And this is an area where I'm trying to provide personal assistance. For example, PhD students are now required to clear copyright issues before submitting a PhD thesis at the University of Belgrade. This is not well controlled by some faculties. But for example, researchers working in my institutions, they usually come with a list. Sometimes it's very tricky. I'm quite skilled with this. I have a huge experience, but sometimes it's very, very difficult to determine the first source of an illustration and to identify the right entity to be asked for permission. So this is something that is absolutely, if you are developing services, this is absolutely a must. And you don't need any extra resources apart from knowledge, because rights link is used by most commercial publishers. You don't have to pay for this. You just register a free account just to handle this. Also, finding resources that are free of charge or open access. This is something that where you can help a lot. For example, chemical structures. One of the papers that was rejected because somebody used an image of a chemical structure that was copied from another paper. And there was no copyright clearance notice. At the same time, they had free chemical structures at the ChemSpider database. I didn't know that this was available. So this is where we can help. Finding journals. I won't discuss this very in a lengthy manner. There are some tools like journal finders. They're provided by commercial publishers. They're very interesting to test, but they usually just give you the list of journals published by the publisher who has developed the tool. I just test them. They're quite funny because sometimes, for example, we tried to put the abstract of a paper published in an Elsevier journal, and the Elsevier suggested a completely different journal. So it's very interesting. It's a nice try, but it's not really useful. When it comes to choosing a journal, there is a set of questions that researchers usually somehow skip or not aware of all these questions, but this is the list of these questions, and this is where we can help. The primary question for researchers is usually whether a journal has an impact factor or it doesn't have. There are quite many journals that have an impact factor, but they're really, really bad and don't have other things. They don't produce, they don't actually increase the visibility of research. They don't ensure the visibility of research, and they may be involved in some misconduct. So these are the questions where we can help. So I encourage researchers to, for example, whenever they get an invitation to publish in a journal, either unsolicited or not, it doesn't matter, I encourage them to forward these emails to me, and then I do an analysis, and I always try in the response that I provide to them to include this analysis so that they can learn the way of analyzing a journal. So this is quite a lengthy email, but I say, okay, I've checked the domain where journal is hosted. I checked who registered the domain. I checked the journal, the domain in the Wayback Machine. I usually do this if there is something suspicious about journal. So I try to make this analysis as transparent as it should be, so that they can learn by reading it, that they can become aware of the questions they can ask and they should ask when selecting a journal. Finding open access journal is another topic. Irina will probably cover her in her webinar about predatory journals, so I won't discuss this much. There are tools like Think, Check, Submit. Also, DOAJ is underused by researchers in Serbia. They're becoming increasingly aware of it, but it's not insufficiently used. One of the reasons for this is that they are required by the National Research Evaluation System to publish in journals that have an impact factor. This is one of the reasons. If they had a more strict open access mandate, they would certainly use the OAJ much more. As for dissemination, visibility, and impact, the key pillar in my dissemination efforts are related to the repository. I've talked about this really much, but there are some things, if you know how repositories work, then you should do all the improvements and especially register your repository with international aggregators in order to make, they're extremely visible. Being visible in core, open air, unpayable base increases the visibility of your research. And we now have some papers that we can show as examples, and researchers are aware of this. So they are not depositing, my researchers at my institute, they are not depositing in the repository alone themselves. They try to avoid this, but when I say, okay, I need a peer-reviewed manuscript of this and this paper because we have an open access mandate, they very readily deliver this to me. And they appreciate this effort and they don't complain. So this is where they see the benefits of open access. They cherish just this kind of effort. Previously, we used website. We have an old-fashioned website, but it contains all the information that is necessary, and we are still using it as a dissemination source. And also training. Training is always it's always applicable, whatever you do. So As for visibility, we should distinguish between institutional visibility and individual visibility. And this is, if you remember one of the previous slides, about priorities. For librarians, institutional visibility is always a priority. For researcher, individual visibility is a priority. So we should somehow make a balance between these. And there are many things that we can do. One of the things that I'm doing very readily, because we are subscribed to Scopus in Web of Science, I'm trying to regularly correct errors that I find. There are options. You can submit correction requests for any database, commercial database, and even free ones. This is something that is not normally used. People, I don't know, they're just hesitant. I'm doing this quite regularly, and I regularly check this information, and this improves the visibility of institution. For example, if there are some papers that are misaffiliated with another institution because the affiliation information is not parsed correctly, this paper is missing from the list related to an institution. And the same applies to researchers. So I do corrections both for my researchers, because there are not many, there are less than 40, and for my institution. I also provide training so that they can do these corrections themselves. Some of them do, but most of them don't. But it's good for them to know that this can be done and that they can ask a librarian to do this. And I will explain the rest through examples about metrics and about visibility in general. We started at my institution, researcher identities and profiles and services enabling this are taken very seriously. I identified this as a very important topic already in 2008 when researcher ID appeared, and very soon after that I created profiles for my researchers because they were not interested, and I'm still maintaining profiles for most of them, and they appreciate this effort. For example, you can see they can delegate another trusted person to take care, to be able to update their ORCID profiles, and they just I'm authorized to update their profiles, and I'm actually doing this more frequently than they are doing. This is very important for us, and this increases the visibility of our research, and we also integrated this. I talked about this previously in our institutional repository. This is an example of Scopus alerts that are related to the work regarding corrections. So if you have nice and clean profiles of researchers in Scopus, you can set up an alert. And researchers, I use two types of alerts. They get an email when a new paper authored by them is indexed by Scopus, and they also get this. This is really something that they like. They get an alert, weekly alerts when their papers are cited. If the papers are not cited during a particular work, they don't get an email. But if they are cited, they get a list of papers citing their work. This wasn't difficult for me to create, to set up, because I'm taking care of their profiles in Scopus. I submit these correction requests. And this is something that it's easy for them to do, but they don't do because they don't have registered profiles on Scopus, which is free. Once you have a subscription, registering a profile in Scopus, personalized profile, is free, but they are not using these features. So I tried actually to fill in this gap and to provide this as a kind of service. So I set it up once. I check this from time to time, because sometimes it happens that something gets wrong with a particular profile. But this is something that once you set it, you don't really have to work anything else. It's something that is a service. They perceive it as a service, but you don't have really much effort related to this. Also, we provide links to the different profiles on our websites, and this is extracted from our repository, and this is the result of this effort to keep these profiles neat and clean. Also, this is something new. The adoption of this is still quite poor, but this is something that is good to know and good to promote. Site provides the so-called smart citations. This service actually parses full text and based on artificial intelligence decides whether a citation is positive or negative. This is also embedded in Zotero. Actually it is integrated with Zotero, but there is also an add-on. This is new. I'm still experimenting with this. This is very useful, an Altmetric, which is it's actually promoted through our repository. We provide this information in the repository. This is something researchers usually don't have time to do, but when it's available, they certainly have a look at it. And this is something that where a librarian can help. Institutions in Scopus, this is important. I'm very much involved in drafting reports for my institution, and long ago I created a list. This is updated regularly. I created a list that includes all the papers published by my researchers, researchers affiliated with my institute historically in Scopus since the 1970s until today. This was something that I did, well, in the first year when I came here, and this list has proven to be very useful. It's much exploited whenever we need these, of course, these figures are not so precise, but they're just great when we have to make a presentation about our institute or to make a report for the ministry. They're very, very useful, and I can do a lot within minutes because this list is regularly updated based on this saved search. So whenever I have new hits, I add them to this list. Last year, because the reporting system changed, I created a list for individual research groups, because we are now supposed to provide as the institute data about their performance. The problem is that this works with a limited number of records, but huge universities or huge faculties cannot use this. They can do this for departments, but they can not use this for the institution. So this tool is not perfect, but for me, it helps me a lot. Another thing that I'm just getting ready to start working on is Lensorg. EIFL provided training on this, and Aaron Tai wrote a few very interesting blog posts about this. This is something on my to-do list, and I see this as a potential solution to this problem. Researchers, librarians in Serbia are increasingly much involved in reporting. It's not that they this kind of involvement is not seen, for example, by their bosses as something that should be part of their work. But when it comes to reporting, and when bosses don't know what to do, they just have a habit of going to the library and saying, okay, can you fix this for me? So during the last winter, around New Year, had several training sessions, some very late in the evening, supporting colleagues from other institutes and explaining to them how they can use this feature in Scopus to facilitate this process of reporting. And it's very interesting. For example, we usually show this diagram in our presentation because this H index is well, considerably high, keeping in mind the profile of our institution. This is an example of a report. Last year, we were, for the first time, we were asked to do a self-assessment report, and it was new for us. So, for example, I used the information from my institutional repository to create this diagram showing the actually growth of open access content in our repository and the effects of our institutional policy, because we introduced the institutional policy in September 2018, and it's apparent that this open access mandate is having an effect. This is the report provided by Scopus, not very accurate, but quite illustrative when you have when you need it for a presentation or something like this. Another point, we are closing to the end of this presentation, is communication. You will have to, researchers are a group of users that are quite difficult to communicate with. Sometimes they are vain, they have some misperceptions and misconceptions about themselves, about their work, about you as a librarian and library as a service provider. So you should find the means to handle this. For me, the most important thing is to be responsive and reliable. I'm probably too responsive. I respond as soon as they ask a question, even if I shouldn't be available because I'm on holidays. You shouldn't be doing this. I'm doing this because my research community is very small, and I actually enjoy very much communication with them now that we've built a kind of trust among us. But you should be responsive. They should know when they should expect a response. So you can say, okay, I will provide response in library provides response in 48 hours, and you should provide response within 48 hours. This is great. This is enough, but it's important for them to know that they will get some kind of support. Also, as for choosing communication paths, for example, for some librarians, social media are a very good way of communicating with their researchers. For me, it's not, because my researchers are not using the. So you should find meaningful communication paths, and you should be where your audience is. It's absolutely pointless, for example, pushing them to use a WhatsApp group if they're not using WhatsApp group, if they don't want to use WhatsApp in their professional lives. So that's quite clear. Also, I still keep on sending unsolicited news. I know it may be interpreted as rude. My research community doesn't interpret this as rude. They appreciate this, and this is something you should consider, because they may not know that they need some piece of information. Also, my researchers, they are not working in the same premises as myself, so I see them relatively rarely, and I use emails. I usually write quite long emails with very accurate information. I know that some of them don't read them when I send them, but I know that they save these emails and that they read them later. Some of them even like to provide some feedback. So it's very important. And also it's very important to encourage feedback, all sorts of feedback. For example, I can communicate with my researchers directly, but a colleague, she works in another institute that has more than 300 researchers. She uses surveys. She uses Google Forms, she makes a survey, and she asks them, and they do provide feedback. Sometimes 15% of them provide feedback. That's not bad. Sometimes this feedback is more active, more proactive. So it's a good way to. You should see which works of getting feedback work, but which ways. But you should always encourage feedback. Also, a piece of advice. I believe it's already clear. When you have some functionalities available, test them. Some of them may not be useful for you, but test them and use them. If they are good, just use them as much as you can. Also, you building on what you already have, you can build services. For example, my alerts, they are a service, and they are perceived as a serious service. This is not really much effort, and this doesn't cost anything, but this is a useful service. Also, it's very good to try to reach expert knowledge in the tools you are trying to present. If you don't have this kind of expert knowledge, it is advisable to find a colleague who can help, who can organize training at your institution, who can just step in and help your researchers. Networking is very important, and it's very important to crowdsource learning resources. So in Serbia, research librarians working at institutes, we don't actually, if I know that a colleague has a presentation that is good, I won't undertake to make, I will reuse it. I won't undertake to make my own because it's a lot of effort and time. So this is an example how we are sharing this. We have an association that is semi-formal of research librarians, and we have a page, and we have some already made and shared resources that can be reused by other colleagues, and then that can be shared with their researchers. And this actually works. We also undertook a training program in 2015. So we said, okay, the research institutes, faculties, they can invite, here is a list of our trainers and topics, and if you like, you can invite us, we will come. This doesn't cost anything, just send an invitation letter so that our director doesn't get angry that we are not at work. And our directors are, they like when we go to other institutions to provide training. We don't usually have problems with this. And this actually motivated some research institutes to employ librarians. They didn't have librarians at the time. So they employed librarians in the meantime because they were not aware of the services that could be provided by librarians. So anything that can be used, just make the best use of it. Thank you. Well, I believe I talked too much, so I would like to hear questions now.
Thanks a lot, Milica. That was wonderful, very comprehensive. So now, colleagues, if you have any questions to Milica, you could unmute yourself and ask, or you can type in a chat or a Q&A. So I think everyone should be allowed to talk if you unmute your mic.
Thank you very much, Milica. Thank you, Irina. I have a few questions that I just want to find out. Milica, for the Scopus, how were you able to set up the alerts for the researchers? Is it that you looked at the researchers?
I can show this. Yeah, I will just go to Scopus and show. It's very easy. So it's crucial that their profiles are neat and clean. Oh, I have to, just a minute. I have to turn on the proxy. I turned it off. Just a minute. It's crucial that their profiles are clean and tidy, and that they have distinct profiles. Once you have this is quite easy. So connecting the Scopus profile with ORCID, it also works fine. So I will try, I've already logged in, so I will share my screen again. Just a moment. So just let me try. I don't see, it's better now. So for example, I start by searching a particular colleague by name. And I find, so in case I had multiple entities and Scopus that are related apparently to the same person, I would submit a request to merge them. In case, for example, a paper was missing and there was an automatic way to include it, I would go to Contact Us and I would just write an explanation what is required. But in most cases, these requests are quite straightforward. You have options that you can use, and here it is, edit profile. You use this option and then add whatever is missing. In case you want to set up an alert, you just find the person you need, go here and say, okay, this is this author with this author identifier in Scopus. I want document alert. This means when a new paper authored by this colleague appears, she will get an email, or I will get an email. It depends whose email address I put here. And if I want to be informed about citations of her papers, then I select this one. And then here I put an email address. So this is mine. I put here her email address and set up the frequency, and that's all. That's absolutely all you should do. It's very, very easy and straightforward. So for example, even if you have 50 or 100 researchers, this is doable. This is something they wouldn't do, but it's a great help for them, and they like this. They like to have an insight into this, and they don't see this as a priority. They just do this one. For example, I have a colleague also who likes to read papers which cite his work. And he usually comes to me and says, okay, I can't find the full text of this paper. Can you download it for me? And he's informed through these alerts that his paper is cited. So he's regularly updated who has cited his work. This is important. For example, if some criticism appears of someone's paper or other publication, they can be informed in a timely manner. So it's very, very easy.
Thank you very much. But the email address, can you put two email addresses there? So you can put the researcher's email address as well as your email address. So that
I'm not sure whether it works in this version, but you can always create two. If you can't put two email addresses, you can create two alerts, the same, with the same parameters. Okay. It's very straightforward.
My other question is there a problem with a paper? Can you cite a paper, or is there a problem where you have cited a paper that has been retracted? Is there a problem with that? A retracted paper?
If you cite, if you cite a retracted paper, this is not perceived as good practice. This means that your ways of doing research and analyzing the sources you are using are sloppy. Because, for example, you're citing a paper, in your paper, you're citing a paper that is retracted because the findings were disputed. This means that your findings may be compromised as well. This is a serious problem. It's probably underestimated because, for example, smaller journals, they don't have the means to support their peer reviewers in identifying these papers. But to me, this is really, really important. For example, when I also, I was invited by my colleagues. I'm not a medical librarian, but on several occasions, a colleague who is doing medical research in medicine, she invited me to attend some conferences, and they always wanted me. Medical researchers are very, like all the others, they are very aware of the complexity of searching literature because they are doing systematic reviews where they need to identify papers, and then they extract the statistical data from these papers, and then they analyze and write papers based on this. This is very complex, and for example, searching PubMed for me is a challenge. I'm not doing this daily, and whenever I'm asked by medical colleagues to do this, I have to. It takes a week to me to get prepared because there are some new features, and also I have to test things. And I never refuse whenever whenever people call me to give some training. I never refuse this. Only when I don't know anything about the topic. So when I was preparing these materials for them, it took me quite a lot of time to learn some things. And for example, retracted papers can significantly undermine the whole structure if you are doing a systematic research and you're not aware of a retracted paper, a paper retracted not for technical reasons, but because the findings are disputed, because you're including the data from this paper in another analysis that should result in a paper. And this is something that well, serious journals, they identify these things. Reviewers may identify this and they just reject your paper. So this is a very, very important area of support.
Thank you very much, Milica. I asked that because you can cite a retracted paper unawares. That is why I asked that. The next question is, I mean, your presentation is very comprehensive. You're giving us a lot of information, knowledge, and all that. I just want to find out, how do you support them, researchers when they are writing for funding, this looking for funding sources and funding proposals and funders requirements, and how do you support them?
I'm not doing this at the moment because we are a rather small. We are a rather small institution, and we usually appear in projects as a partner, as a small partner. So they are usually not the main players in a project. What I'm doing, where I'm supporting them for funding. For example, last year, well, actually in 2019, that was the first time, they were supposed to provide something that looks like a research data management plan. This was not dubbed so, but it was actually a research data management plan. And upon realizing that they are required to do this and that they didn't know how to do this, I undertook to make a kind of template. So I went through the application form, and then I wrote a kind of template where they were supposed to choose some options, or it was a Word document, but it was really, really helpful. And actually, this template was later used in another project where we developed something more serious. So I'm usually trying, whenever they have, for example, sometimes they are required to, in those where, when they are small partners in projects, they are required to provide, for example, information about the competence of the institution based on some metrics, etc. That's where I provide this information. Also, when negotiating partnerships, for example, 2 years ago, we had some potential partners from China. We had a meeting with them, and I prepared a presentation with all the metrics that I found relevant, especially those that are favorable to our institute. That's where I'm trying to step in. The problem is that they are not aware. They are still not aware that they should ask. So whenever I have this information that they may have a need, I'm trying to step in. I'm not finding funding information for them. I'm not skilled about this. But for example, we have a colleague at the University of Novi Sad. She works as a part of projects office at the Faculty of Science in Novi Sad. She is probably the best expert in Serbia that we have in this area, and she shares funding information with us. She knows that there are many small institutions, and she readily shares all the calls that, for example, we may find interesting. And then I distribute those calls to my colleagues. This is a kind of crowdsourcing as well.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, the floor is there. Is open. If you have any question, you can unmute yourself and then ask, please.
Are you subscribed to Scopus in Ghana?
Yes, we subscribe. Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, we subscribe to University of Ghana too does, and one or two universities too.
For us, it's very helpful. My research community uses Scopus. For example, researchers in humanities don't use it so much, but chemists use Scopus, and we use Scopus as a discovery tool. It's really, really helpful. So it's quite expensive, but it's really used, unlike the Web of Science. We use the Web of Science. It's not user-friendly. It doesn't really offer many opportunities beyond metrics.
Yes, because Scopus is able to index some African journals, whereas Web of Science does not. So we use it a lot. And then for us in Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, we use it again for research evaluation and for
in Serbia it's officially used, but now the importance of Scopus is growing because now researchers are allowed to, for example, use either or the Web of Science or Scopus. But for example, as for impact factors, for the ranking of journals, impact factors are still used officially. This is a major obstacle. The evaluation system is a major obstacle to the promotion of open science. For example, I'm always sorry to see we have so many journals that are good journals, open access journals. These are diamond open access journals, and I communicate very actively with their editors. They often ask for assistance, and I appreciate their efforts. I'm trying to help whenever I can, because I really appreciate this effort. This is voluntary work. And they strive to provide submissions, to ensure submissions to their journals. At the same time, our researchers publish their papers in poor quality journals, international journals, just because they have an impact factor. But they cannot compare in terms of quality to our journals that don't, to some of our journals that don't have the impact factor. And I'm always sorry to see this.
Maybe we should explain that Diamond Open Access Journal is a journal that doesn't charge article processing charges. So it's free for researchers to publish in it.
Yes, and they are easily identifiable now. You can see on one of my slides, they're easily identifiable in DOAJ. And actually the majority of open access journals are Diamond Open Access journals. This publishing model, I believe that there are many similar journals in Africa and South America. I see this as a very, very good model, but the problem is with the evaluation system at the national level, it could be all different. We could support these journals if we manage to change the evaluation system.
Eric typed in a question in a Q&A, and I'll read it to you.
I can see it now, yes.
At the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that some of your librarians lack the skill to work in research institution. Does this have anything to do with their level of qualification?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. For example, at research libraries, some 10 years ago, we had quite many people working as librarians who didn't have formal qualifications. In Serbia, you can work as a librarian if you have a bachelor master degree, and there is you have to pass a series of exams to get a sort of a license to work as a librarian. These are formal requirements. So you need, and you can just complete any study group, not just library information science. The problem was that many people actually didn't have a university degree, but they occupied this position of a librarian. So they didn't know any foreign languages, they didn't have any skills. They were just doing something unrelated to library and information science. And this was quite a typical situation. For example, in the 1980s, the cleaning lady was formally a librarian at this institute where I'm now. I'm actually the first full-time librarian since the establishment of the institute in the late 1940s. So this is quite a typical situation in Serbia. Now all these people are getting retired, and we have an increasing number of people who actually are trained librarians, who have completed library information science, but they don't acquire proper training at the faculty. They can usually do very well at public libraries because this is the largest group of libraries in my country. And they, for example, they're not aware of citation databases when they graduate. They then don't know what citation analysis is. They're not aware of the metrics. They don't know anything about, for example, journal databases. They don't know which resources they can count on. So it's very difficult. For example, I'm doing some training on repositories. And when I have a young librarian who has just graduated, in order to be able to explain what is allowed in a repository and what's not, I need to start from scratch, from explaining the whole system, the databases, the research ecosystem, the evaluation system, the subscription model through the national consortium, the functions of the national consortium. It's quite extensive, quite an extensive training. We are trying now to mitigate this through, I mean, situation is getting better over the last 5 years. We have an increasing number of trained librarians, and we have much better networking So they know. For me personally, it's important that each new librarian knows that there are people who are other colleagues, librarians, who are ready to provide help and training.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? Then I'll email you Milica's slides, and she included a link to them in a chat. Oh, there is, yeah, Eric thanked you for the answer. And I'll also share the recording, so that probably will happen tomorrow, because it takes some time to
you can
generate.
also write, you have my email in the presentation, and you can also write whatever kind of feedback you may have.
Thanks a lot, Milica, for sharing your experiences and for being available for this webinar during Milica's holiday. So we appreciate it a lot.
No, in my life, crowdsourcing, volunteer work, and training have a really high priority. This is something that if I can, I try not to refuse. This is very important, and I'm lucky enough to work with people who have the same approach to these things.
So, Milica, I think we've learned quite a lot, more especially the area in supporting researchers, because there are a lot of things that librarians are not aware of, and we need to equip ourselves in that area and be able to help researchers to make their work very easy. And I believe that with that, like the library profession will soar very high. I have learned quite a lot today, more especially in the area of those retraction things. Retraction, I've seen it before, I know it, but I've not taken much attention to it. And then the issue of the scopus. We have the scopus, we are not exhausting it very well. I mean, recently there was one lecturer that I was looking at doing verification of his journals, whether the journals are credible. And what happened was that some of the journals were not indexed in scopus, but he was saying that there are some journals that have cited his papers, or there are some articles that have cited his papers that are indexed in scopus, and therefore his paper is indexed in scopus. And I said, no, it cannot be, because your paper is not a paper that you publish in a journal within that is indexed in scopus. Rather, it's just that your paper has been cited by an article that has been published in scopus, but that does not make your journal, your paper indexed in scopus. So I mean, today I've learned quite a lot. So thanks very much. I don't know whether you
I can share something, despite it is recorded. Perhaps I shouldn't, but usually when I see that something is wrong, I submit a comment or a correction request. So some years ago, I found a journal. I won't mention the country because it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. I mentioned the journal. One of researchers from Serbia published there. I couldn't find some information. I was supposed to upload the paper in a repository, and I couldn't find some information, very important information about the policy relating to this. So I started reading very carefully everything that was on the website of this journal, and I found something, a policy that is not okay. A policy saying that the authors who submit their papers and who have previously published the papers from this particular journal and other journals published by the same publisher would have priority in deciding which papers will be accepted or not. This was not formulated as some journals, for example, in Serbia, we had some journals which said, okay, you need to cite at least 5 papers from our journal in order to be accepted for publishing. And of course, some of them were rejected by the Web of Science. But this was softened, but it wasn't okay. The policy wasn't okay. And I reported this to the Web of Science in Scopus. And I had an exchange with them. The journal was not excluded from any of the databases. In my opinion, these journals should have never been accepted in any of these. The papers published in this journal are of poor quality. The policies, as it shouldn't be. This is an ethical issue if you have such a formulation in your policy. But they apparently, they said that they have their means of evaluating journals, and they didn't find anything that is serious about it, because, you know, the crime wasn't actually committed, but it was allowed by the formulation. So I'm very skeptical about this. Whenever our researchers ask me to help them find a journal with an impact factor, I do my best to find a journal with an impact factor. I know that they don't have the means to pay APCs, but I'm aware of this, and I'm trying to explain to them whenever I can, hoping that the research evaluation system would change.
Milica, thanks very, very much. You've done 1 hour, 50 minutes talking. You've done very well. Thank you so very much. I think, colleagues, I don't know whether anybody has any question. If you don't, then it's 1 minute to 12 o'clock. That's midday in Ghana. So if you don't have any question, then we may have to draw the curtain down and we'll call it a day. And I just want to thank Irina again for always bringing someone who gives very insightful information, information that is very, very good. We thank you very much. CARLIGH, thanks you very much. Thank you so much for what you have done. Milica, thanks so much. We hope to see you again. But colleagues, I just want to say that we have more coming up. We'll be looking at the usage statistics, the months coming till the end of the year. So we'll look at usage statistics and library management. We'll look at mentorship. We'll look at predatory and open access journals. And then we'll look at, finally, end of the year, we'll look at making your library visible. So these are the webinars and the topics that will be discussed next month. That is September, October, November, and then December. So colleagues, I'll say again, thank you very much for coming. And I believe that you have learned quite a lot. So thanks
a lot, Richard and CARLIGH and Milica. I also learned a lot. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.